Do you know that you could get just about anything on Fiverr? Like code reviews, for example. You can actually have someone review your code because reasons? I assume this is for, I don't know, maybe some homework or something like that, but wouldn't you just pay someone on Fiverr to do your homework at that point? Who knows? I don't know that I trust Fiverr to do code reviews for professional projects, so that's why today I've gone ahead and decided to pay somebody on Fiverr to review my terrible code. So let's take a look. So the code that I've designed is from a previous assignment that I've had in my Intro to Java class, which if you know any of the work I've done, I've been doing Java for a few years. I definitely know what I'm doing, but I had to turn in an assignment a few weeks ago for Intro to Java. I had to make it do X, Y, Z and follow X rules, whatever. But what I've gone ahead and done is I've made it much worse. I took my original code and just trashed it. And then I sent it over to this guy, who is Elon Musk 77. I don't know if he's the real Elon Musk. I doubt it. But I sent it over to him. So hey, we're going to go ahead and check his code review. Take a look at exactly what he fixed and what suggestions that he had and what he didn't fix, more importantly. So the real question I'm asking here, is a $5 code review on Fiverr worth the $5? Alright, so I've gone ahead and made a few changes to my original code. There are a couple of things wrong with this, just immediately starting out the gate here. One of the things is that there's a pom.xml, which if you're not familiar with, that's Maven. I used Maven for this assignment, although didn't really have to, just chose to. Whatever, it's fun. So I'm going to kind of go through my code here and just review it as I would review this code, point out all the details and missed things that maybe could have been better. So let's take a look. So yeah, the first thing that we've seen is the group ID not matching, or the me.egg not matching the me.test in the package name. It's not bad, but it's considered good practice to have these things kind of match up. Other than that, this pom.xml file is actually pretty okay. It looks fine. It's locked to Java 1.8. That's an important thing to note, is that the source and target are both set to Java 8 or Java 1.8, depending on what era you're from. And the artifact ID is set to homework 1 without the dash, even though the project itself is set to homework-1, which again is basically just considered good practice. It's something that I would look at changing possibly. So another thing that we see here is a data.txt in the resources file, and all this really is just kind of a parsing issue. So this particular assignment was essentially to take this data.txt and essentially it's just kind of these things with prices attached to them. You have a television selling for $439.65. You have a radio selling for $40, things like that. And you're supposed to take this data.txt and you're supposed to input all the lines, and then you're supposed to output a more or better formatted version of this file along with an increased price, including taxes and things like that. So it's a fairly simple assignment, just requiring some basic file I/O and some basic transformations and output. So it's not too complicated, and I didn't send this guy the Mona Lisa, right? So I'm hoping that it's a little bit easier to review and it's worth the $5. So finally we get to the actual code itself, and this is the main class. So this is the thing that's basically doing all the work. This particular assignment has only one or two classes. I got a little bit fancy and added another class in there, but really it's only supposed to be done in generally one class, just to make everything neat, because at this point in time, the class that I'm in hasn't actually done classes yet. So we have two classes in one source file, which you can see here, the item data and the main class, which isn't actually good practice, but since you're only supposed to turn in one file, So one of the main things that really jumps out at me right off the bat here is this create file function. Now you can actually see it if we scroll down here. You can actually see it right here. In Java, you're looking at camel case and Pascal case. Since Java is a case-sensitive language, these are different case typings that you can use with your code. So Pascal case is when you write your variable names, function names, class names, etc. That's when you write them with this first capital letter, and then the next word is a capitalized letter. Now with Java, it's usually camel case, except the classes are Pascal case. So in Java, you'll have in file or out file, where the first word starts with a lowercase, and the second word and all consecutive words beyond that start with an uppercase. And in this case, I've gone ahead and I've created my function using Pascal case rather than camel case, whereas in Java, the standard is all camel case except for classes, which are Pascal case. Another thing that kind of jumps out at me right off the bat here is this data.txt. It looks like that we're creating a file called data.txt, but our in file here is actually data.txt with a lowercase d. So this particular assignment will only work on Windows. It won't work on Mac or Linux, because this case sensitivity issue on Mac and Linux would prevent the file from being read. The easiest solution here is just to capitalize the D, or since this create file function, even better, since this create file function actually returns the file that's created, it's just simply use that. So that's something that would jump out at me and something I would take a look at refactoring. Another thing here is that this hash set, these items, this hash set is actually being set as a hash set. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, but in Java the convention is to remove and use the lowest common denominator for what you're trying to do. What I mean by that is when you have a hash set, what you really want to do is you want to put it into a variable called items, right? And you want that variable to be a type of set, not necessarily hash set. Hash set doesn't really give you any benefits, and it kind of ties you down. If later on you decide that you want to use like a tree set or something like that, then you're kind of limited, and you'll have to go back and set your items back to a tree set or something like that. Whereas it's a little bit easier to modify if you just use set instead. Another issue that I took a look at and that I purposely put in here was that in Java 8, and the IDE does point this out, in Java 8 you don't actually need this item data in here. This is what's called the diamond operator, because when you remove this, it looks like a diamond. And in Java 7 and previous, this was required. You had to have a hash set of type item data, but in Java 8, they removed the need for this, and so you can just create a new hash set, and it will automatically take the type that you set in the items here, which again just makes it easier to edit later in the future if you need to. Another thing that really jumps out at me here is that this buffered reader here, this isn't being used at all. So this is something that I would definitely again take a look at if I were reviewing this code myself. Why are we using this buffered reader if we're not actually using this buffered reader? So this block of code here is a nightmare. This can be simplified quite a lot. First of all, not only is this code basically a reproduction of what's already inside Java using this buffered reader that we have here, this but it's actually not even platform agnostic, because we're looking for a \n here, and we could have a \r\n, which is a Windows carriage return. Versus the Linux and Mac just simply new line. So down here as well, we actually have a non-platform agnostic return \r\n. That's the carriage return plus the new line, whereas with Mac and Linux they just use the new line. So this is going to cause issues with cross-platform capabilities later on. The rest of this block is kind of a giant mess, I said before, because really it just re-implements something that already exists. So we're looking at basically a while loop that reads each character, or reads the file character by character, and then looks for a new line to terminate the what we're creating in the string. This is a giant mess. We have this string here that each character that's being read from the file we put into that string all the way up until it gets to the \n, the new line character, and then the string is terminated and we're done, and we can add that into our item data. Now this is bad for two reasons. One, because this string is actually going to have this \r in it as well, so you're going to have a string with a carriage return in it before it hits the new line. So you're going to have weirdness with your output file, in that your output file will have an additional carriage return before its carriage return and new line, which is just strange. And also, we can just make this a lot easier by using our buffered reader here. Okay, so I've gone ahead and simplified this giant mess of a block into essentially a much smaller block. Now this isn't perfect as well, I just kind of cobbled this together real fast, but essentially what you're doing is you're just taking this buffered reader that you have, and you're reading each line. You're using the readLine function to just read it line by line, and that solves a lot of that problem. It even gets rid of that extra carriage return that you have, or may not have. It's a lot friendlier, it's a lot smaller, it's a lot easier to use. And I mentioned this before, but our /r/n here, that is not platform agnostic. All you have to do is just replace those /r/n's with system.line separator, and then suddenly your code is now platform agnostic again. It can run on Windows, Mac, or Linux, and it'll run just fine on each platform, or even cross-platform if you decide that you're to transfer your files and your code across a new platform. And finally, we have our item data here, goes into a hash set. So this item data here is going into this set, I should say, rather than hash set. It's going into a set. And what we don't have, or what we're missing here, is a equals and hashcode method. Now, set and hash set, tree set, anything like that, all the sets will use the equals and hashcode method of your item data to prove its uniqueness. So if you try to put a non-unique item into a set, it'll just reject the new item because it's non-unique. A set contains only unique items. That's one of the properties of sets. With our item data, each item data is going to be unique regardless of what it has inside it. So if I have an item data with a name and a price, let's say I have a TV and price is $400, and I create a new item data with TV and the price of $400, theoretically it's the same. However, it's going to be different from the original or the other TV with priced at $400. So we should be using, or we should be overriding, our equals and hashcode method in order to take our TVs that are the same and actually make them the same. And IntelliJ helps us with this even just by having this menu item called generate. So if you click on generate, you can actually generate your equals and hashcode methods at the same time, and it's super easy to do. You can even generate your toString method if you really want, which can come in handy sometimes, especially with debugging. So that's all the changes that I would recommend making, or even make, if I were on Fiverr selling my services for $5. I would personally probably choose a bit more than $5, but so I'm gonna check out what the other guy did, and we'll kind of go back and review everything that he's done versus everything that I would have done, and see what he's changed. And so this is the project that the guy on Fiverr sent back to me. So I sent him a project in IDEA. I zipped it all up. I even zipped up the .idea and the target and the IML files. I zipped the entire thing up and I sent it over, and he sent me back what looks like an IDEA project. So that's a good start. At least he wasn't reviewing my code in Eclipse. IDE doesn't really matter. Some people like Eclipse, some people like NetBeans. That's fine. I personally prefer IDEA. IDEA seems like it has a better tool set available for developers than Eclipse or NetBeans. That's my personal preference, and it seems that generally people who use Eclipse are better equipped and better skilled than people who do not. It's anecdotal evidence, but that's what I have to go on. So right off the bat, we can see that the pom.xml file wasn't actually modified at all. The homework one, the group ID, everything seems to have stayed the same, so at the very least it seems to have not been touched. However, what he did do is he separated my item data and the main class, which is more generally accepted practice. So that's can be good or bad. It really depends on what you're doing. For this homework assignment, this would have been a bad thing. However, for a real-world presentation, obviously you want to have a lot of your classes separated into separate files. There are special exceptions, but generally speaking, you want one class per file. All right, so we see the item data here, and I had my gripes about it earlier, and it looks like if we're using the hash set again, assuming that he didn't change the hash set, then he also again didn't look at the equals or hash code values of this item data. So again, we're stuffing this item data into a set where everything is unique, regardless of whether or not is a television selling for $400, regardless of what its unique hash code is in Java. So we want to force that and create our own equals and hash codes, or override our own equals and hash codes. It looks like that was missed in this case. All right, and we have our main class here. We have a couple of different things going on. First of all, we have a breakpoint here, which is a little strange. I'm not sure why you have a breakpoint on static void main. It doesn't really do anything except prevent the program from starting for a minute. So it makes me wonder what his toolchain looks like, what his setup looks like, that he needs to put a breakpoint into the static void main. It's a little strange. All right, and it looks like we have a really interesting layout here with the input file and the output file. We have the input file and output file are both being pulled from source main resources data.txt. This is a little odd because if you remember my original code, we had a create file function that read from the resources directory and outputted to a particular file that I wanted. Now what's interesting about the resources directory is that resources are always packaged into your jar, into your final executable. And when you have those resources there, they're accessible through an input stream reader using this get resource as stream function. So you can pull these resources out of essentially what is memory and then dump them to a file, which is what I've done here. This is the point of the create file. If the file doesn't already exist on disk, then it just pulls it from the resources directory, which is already in the jar, and then outputs it to a file. So it seems like our poor fellow here didn't quite understand what the point of the resources directory was and decided that what we're going to do is we're going to read from a literal resources directory on disk from the source directory rather than from in memory in the Java jar. Does that make any sense? I don't know if that makes any sense, and I apologize if it doesn't. It's basically, this is strange. I haven't really encountered this before except by people who don't understand what the resources directory actually is or exists for. So my guess is that this person doesn't quite understand what resources are actually for. And so here we have a function called create new file. Now it looks like that he did set all of my functions to a proper naming convention, which is good. Or methods, I should say, as they're called in Java. That's kind of what we're looking for. We want good conventions. We want something that'll essentially pass a code review. That's kind of what the purpose of buying a code review on Fiverr is. So we have our create new file here, and essentially all it is just this file path.create new file function and a success or failure printed out to console if it was successful or not. It's a bit of a strange thing to put into a function. I feel like that function should be bigger. Basically, there is a little bit of code reuse up here that could have instead of been split off into separate functions, could have simply been put into a larger function. I mean, small functions aren't bad, but it's a little strange. I don't know if that would actually pass a code review or not. It seems like in some cases, maybe not. It's a bit on the fence. Now here's where we get interesting. So we have a function called read from file and a function called write to file. Now a read from file is actually pouring our data from the file into a hash set, which again is something that I took a look at and said, this isn't quite what I wanted. So when we have these hash sets, we're limiting ourselves. What we really want is we want to take these and put them into sets instead. So instead of returning hash set from our read from file function, we actually want to return set from our read from file function. We want to be as generic as possible so that way we're not introducing random oddities into our code base later that maybe end up screwing us over. If you don't need functions specifically from hash set, then don't use a hash set on your output. Does that make sense? Another thing that we took a look at here and that is a bit off is the fact that this try with resources block here is formatted a little bit strangely. You can see down here that we have our try with resources block as a single line with only one thing in it, whereas this only has one thing in it and it's in multiple lines. It's easier to read if you have multiple items in your try with resources block, if they're split out into new lines, but it's harder to read if it's only one line. It's a little bit splitting hairs, but I don't know that I would accept this. Another thing that we looked at was the fact that this giant mess here could have been simplified, and it looks like this was completely missed. So that's another thing to watch out for. Larger blocks like this, maybe blocks with more cognitive load, will likely be missed entirely, especially if your turnaround time is very fast. And finally, it looks like that the cross-platform functionality here was missed as well with the /Rs and /Ns. Again, this is something that will only run on Windows, and even then, actually, the output will be a bit jank. because of this new carriage return every single line that gets added in. So you end up with lines that, well, end up with a double space, when in reality, if you use the method that I mentioned earlier with the buffered reader, you would have a perfectly aligned output like this. So that is my review of the code review of my terrible code. That makes sense, right? If you like this video, please remember like, comment, and subscribe. If you want me to do more of this, if you just want me to pay people on Fiverr for more random stuff and just kind of do reviews of what they do, I enjoyed it. This was awesome. It was a lot of fun just looking at the code and going, that's not quite what I wanted. It's awesome just to kind of do this. There is actually another Fiverr video coming soon, so hopefully you catch that. And additionally, if you just want to sit down and chill with me for an hour a day, I do live streams on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And honestly, it's just us in chat and myself just sitting down and chilling, just kind of talking to a camera like I'm doing now. You can ask questions, you can sit and chill and chat for a while. I usually have a little alcohol with me. It's a lot of fun. Just come join us. It's cool. So I will see you guys next time in our next series or video of Fiverr stuff, I guess. So yeah, enjoy, and I will see you next time.